Nita here is recording all of the speeches. The reason being that we want to be able to give you a rundown after the event, should you have colleagues you want to share it with, or you want to watch it again. And we'll also try and have a written transcript of exactly what was said, so that you can come back and relearn, and maybe if you didn't get to some of the earlier seminars, you can then get all of the information that was given out at those. Now I'm going to give you all a job of work first, and this is the seminar satisfaction survey. So you're wondering why I'm handing out satisfaction surveys before we've even started, and when you've got them you'll see that the reason is at the top of the page, the first question is what I'd like you to put your mind to now. Before I came to the seminar, what's my knowledge level on this subject? So grab that lovely pen that's inside your folders and circle one of the numbers. 10 assumes you know it all, and 1 assumes you know nothing, and you don't have to show this to anyone else. It's just for your own benefit, and hopefully for a little bit for ours, so that we can know what we're telling you is hitting the mark. Can I take the slides out of those things? Is it not obvious? All right? Excellent. Right, let's introduce our speakers. They're here tonight because these guys actually know about a big bit about selling a business, because they buy businesses. They're professional buyers of business. They're a very unusual breed in the market today, because oftentimes in New Zealand, individual businesses are sold to another business owner rather than a professional buyer of businesses. We tend to be a nation of business owners and small business owners, and business owners sell to each other. These guys represent not only the professionalisation of that as a skill set inside business, but also a possible new business model. In talking to them earlier, they were telling me that they've had approaches from overseas, people who would like to copy the business model, the way of doing business that they're doing at the moment, because it is original, because it's unique, and because others can immediately see the benefit to them and their investors and the people who sell their businesses to them. Very few people ever buy a business. If I ask for a show of hands now, I'm sure you'd be a few people who say yes, they had bought a business, or possibly if I ask the Monteck class of partners, they've merged a business. But you don't do it very often. And it is something that is not the same as acquiring an asset like a house. It's complicated. There are a lot of different aspects that need to be taken into consideration. Unlike buying a house, you can't just go to the council and say, can I have a lien? You have to do your own research, they call it due diligence, into what exactly it is you're buying and what state it's in. And then you also have to form your own view as to whether that's good, bad, or indifferent. It's also terribly emotional. Most of us here are business owners, and so we're very personally invested in our own business. It's like having your own child. Separating the emotion from a financial transaction is really hard and adds a whole layer of complexity to the challenge. And as Karen has already said, most of us will only have one chance to sell our business. Myles and Paul are really in the business of risk reduction. They are looking to buy high-quality assets in a way that delivers a return back to their investors, but also gives confidence that what they're buying has quality, depth, and opportunity. I'm going to let them explain that in more detail, because I don't know the answers. But the great thing about having them here tonight is we get an opportunity to look at the other side of the fence, what it looks like in the dating game of selling a business when actually you're the buyer, not the seller.
Excellent introduction. Thank you very much. So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Myles, and I'm Paul. And what we like to start off by doing is just a quick 2 minutes of our background, so we'll just give you an idea of where the credibility sits. I should point out we're wearing suits right now, because that's the best way to make an impression on you. But if it was tomorrow or yesterday, you could easily have found us with boots on and trousers and somewhere a lot closer to the factory. So I'll kick off for 2 minutes. I started off as a British military officer, dealt with a few problems in the Gulf and Russia and people like that over a number of years. Great fun, but we had too many wars to fight and I wasn't getting home often enough. After that, I wound up ultimately over here running a phone manufacturing company only a couple of kilometres from here. We supplied industrial components. Took that to a certain size, about 3 times what it was, and then set up my own, helping other smaller businesses. That turned into independent director work. And then some of our clients said, can't you syndicate this kind of ownership? Because I would like the benefits of diversification, but I don't want to have to tell my wife we can't go on a holiday because the general manager's decided not to turn up. I want to be insulated from that. And it took us 4 years to work out how to do that in a way that those people felt comfortable to introduce $2/3 and have the right element of control. And that was 2 and a bit years ago. I will give you a little bit more information after that.
My background is essentially self-taught. I left school not knowing what I wanted to do, other than leave school, of course. And I did a couple of odd jobs, and then I started a rubbish company, essentially used the trailer. I borrowed the trailer. And I built that up over a 10-year period, 12 trucks on the road, about 14 staff, and I sold that to Fulton Hogan. And I didn't use an advisor to sell that business. I sat down with the CEO of the division that was buying it, and we did a deal. And of course, I actually think I did a good deal. However, they employed me for 3 months to do a handover, and then subsequently employed me as the general manager for the North Island for the business, which became Envirowaste. And of course, because I had that position, I got to look at their board papers and see what they would have paid for the business had I been a little sharper at the time. But of course, you learn as you go along. And I did that for a few years, and learned an awful lot from the Fulton Hogan board. I then left there and worked for a man called Jim Scott, who started a private equity firm called Aqualine. Jim Scott's claim to fame is he was the CEO of Air New Zealand when Briley Investments owned it back in the 80s. A little bit of a slash and burn merchant. Very, very clever though. Did that for a few more years, went through a few different subsidiaries, learned some more. After that I met Paul and we did some management consulting together, and as he said, that evolved into the customers saying, we'd like to syndicate a business, we'd have spare cash, but we don't want the day-to-day responsibility of running that business. How do we do it? And as Paul said, we'll cover that on a bit later.
So we started just over 2 years ago with the first investment, which is an agricultural manufacturing company called Fieldmaster down in Pukekohe. We make mowers, slashers and toppers, dominate the market if you've been in what we call the rough cut environment. And with that, more recently, we produced the world's fastest mowing machine for Auckland Airport, which Bill English presented or did the opening ceremony for back in August. And we're hopefully selling a couple into Northern Europe at the moment, because it has the ground pressure of a man, which is a big problem when you've got wet grass, and it's all crucial for controlling bird strike. And as a result of developing that technology, we're building a $350 million hovercraft to mow mangrove seedlings for Tauranga Bay Accredited Council, which we're just putting the engine in now. So there's a number of things like that. We're certainly not in the business of staying backwards. And our next company,
Yes, LEP Engineering Plastics. We were quite fortunate to be offered this business because it was a business that was the odd fit inside a larger company, Malaysian company. Engineering plastics, it is what it sounds like. You take plastic, you put it on a lathe or a mill, and you turn it into a shape that the customer wants. And I say we were lucky because the owners that had it were commodity brokers, so they didn't understand the business. So they would buy sheet in and sell sheet out, and that was it. LEP had all sorts of advantages if you knew how to actually run an engineering firm. For instance, they make the plates on your conveyor at the Auckland Airport. So you pick up your bag off the carousel, the black plates, they make all of those and they export them around the world. That's the sort of thing that is not a commodity product. Every single airport has a different requirement. Every single customer of ours has a slightly different pattern. So the engineering nous of the staff is what is actually going to make us money there. And I suppose our claim to fame at the moment, if we have one, is that when we arrived in that business, they had an absenteeism problem. Staff were disengaged. Now, we do not have an absenteeism problem. And matter of fact, sick days, because they accumulate. Bruce, you need to tell me how to stop this from happening. Sick days accumulating. And all of a sudden, we've got all this liability for potential sick days because the guys just love what they do and they're engaged. That company subsequently went on to buy a 3D printing company.
That's right. We identified that the plastics industry was ripe for consolidation. There were a number of aging owners with injection moulding or other plastics businesses. We bought one of those down in Christchurch last year and added it to the existing injection moulding business. So we took the machines, we took the staff, we took the work, but we left behind the rent overheads and the other overheads like that. And we added all of that gross margin to our bottom line. And that's been very successful. And we still continue to export wheelchair controls to China, which is a particularly satisfying thing to do. Get one back on the runners. We also were lucky enough to acquire a 3D printing company, the largest one in the country, which has a lot of crossover with plastics, and it's a very exciting world. And one we just started to get into with that company anyway. It's just this opportunity came up because the owner was 67, and we couldn't fail but to take it. And that's been a very exciting journey. We could talk about that all night long, but
yes, and the last business we bought November last year was Massport Foundry. Massport is an iconic name in this country. We bought the Foundry, which is roughly half of the Massport business. The rest of it is Massport Consumer, so lawnmowers, barbecues, fireplaces, has nothing to do with us. So we bought the Foundry. So we've got 90 men walking around in overalls, casting iron. And the good thing about that is, again, it was a business that was neglected. It had been run by people that saw it as a sunset industry, and therefore they were focused on cost reduction rather than growth. But in reality, after we did our research, we found that the worldwide market for foundry or cast iron is growing by 3% a year. There's potential there for us. And again, it exports 80% of what it makes. So it's very satisfying having a company in New Zealand that exports that much. And one of the most satisfying parts of that is, if you know what a 350 Chevrolet engine is, and they are everywhere in the world, we make 350 Chevrolet V8 heads, cylinder heads, in Auckland, and we export them by the container load back into America. It's very satisfying. But I suppose, in short, what we're saying is, over the past 2 years, we have bought 5 businesses. Prior to that, through our consulting experience and working for corporates, we were involved in other acquisitions, but it wasn't as personal because we were spending a corporation's money. Now we're spending investors' money from people that we know and who trust us. It becomes very personal along the way. So we like to think that we do it correctly, and whilst we haven't done everything perfectly, we seem to be on the right side of the ledger. So what's important when a so-called professional buyer comes along to look at a business? And it's, I'm afraid it's exactly the same as property. So property, we all know, is location, location, location. For business buyers, it's certainty, certainty, certainty. I want to know that that customer is going to turn up every month for the rest of their life and spend their money. And when I sneak through a price rise, I want them to say, your product is so good and your service is at such a high level, I don't mind paying another 3%. And they just keep coming back. So it's certainty that we really look at. And that's certainty, risk mitigation, whatever term you want to put on it. That's essentially what we want to have when we look at a new business.
And the next level down, that means comprehensive information about stuff. So in the course of last year, we will have looked at 30 to 40 businesses, which is reading the information memorandums, digging around. We've got a part-timer that does research work for us. We'll sit down and nut it out. We'll look at the value chain, we'll bring up people that might be involved in it. And if anything smells uncertain, at the end of the day, it's a trade-off of time and risk. We'll just think, thank you, we'll wait for the next one. So certainty is really important. If you consider some of the purchasing decisions that you've made in your life, when you need to be reassured that someone has thought everything through, say they were building a house for you or something like that, you need to take that buyer's perspective where what you've got to offer is. That's comprehensive information, written planning, because that really gives people an idea of what's gone through people's minds in the previous years. It's written reporting, because that actually helps them understand what's happened. Otherwise, when you look at, if you're just working off year-end financials, you say, oh yeah, but those couple of months, they were really tricky because this happened. I might want to believe you, but that doesn't mean I can believe you as the custodian of someone else's money. So I then have to spend a lot longer looking for proof of that. Written records, like warranties. The difference between being able to say we have every single warranty written down here and we've traced the cause of it and show that we've identified it, compared to saying, oh yeah, they cost us about 30 grand last year. That difference is huge. It's also one of those things where it's how you address the problem gives us a feel for how you address every problem, not just the one we've asked about. So if it was asking to make the problem go away, brush it under the carpet, move on to the next question, we assume the same attitude has persisted with any kind of difficulty. We want systems, not personalities. Unfortunately, it's great to have good leaders, but actually, in an ideal world, the wheels would tick over without the charisma, the dedication, or the deep knowledge they have, unless you actually physically sell that deep knowledge. So look at everything like that, and being cheeky about it, even represent it as much as that as you can, even if that isn't the way it often works out. We want accuracy, not approximation. You have a very first meeting to talk about something, and when someone says, the margin dropped from 58.2 to 57.3 because of X, Y, and Z, you go, okay, they know their stuff. And all of a sudden, you make an instant judgment about how you're going to judge everything they say after that. Ultimately, it's about proof, not belief.
Okay, so the hardest question that you will ever be asked is how much are you prepared to pay for the business that you're looking at? And there's a dynamic